archetypal ideas.
He carved into his own subconscious as well. Have you ever read any of the Red Book?
Yes, I studied that in Santa Fe.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
There's a lot there in terms of what came up in his experiences with his dreams, memories, dreams, and reflections.
Welcome to the Beauty Seed.
The people that are there, how do you, empower them to become creators? As an artist, it's one of the most rewarding things.
So how do you?
Yeah, I think you have to set up ground. If you have groups, if you're lucky to have groups of kids, set up ground rules with safety and fairness.
What do you mean by fairness?
How do we make it safe and fair for young children by paying attention, giving an attention to what comes up in the empty space, which is if you have 5 interest centers, which has to do with art, music, blocks, art, books, dress-up play, if they want to be dramatic, and one other one. Oh,
Tactile.
Mechanical. Yeah, tactile. And then there's the empty space. So the building can go on because imagination seems to thrive in the blank spaces.
Yes. I want to just... What is it that what is fairness to you, though, in that?
Fairness means that all people are allowed to function and to be in relationship. And when the relationship becomes injured, we restore the relationship by reconstructing the events that just happened.
Right.
Johnny hits Billy. Instead of seeing the devil in Johnny, to see what's the growing he's working on. Did you want to tell him something?
Yeah. Did you feel like he wasn't listening to you? Gotcha. So really, by fairness, you're talking to a space that's created where people can step into equal access to a space of being heard, of valuing our different perspectives and aptitudes in interacting with creative space. Is that what you
Yes.
know what I mean? Cool.
Yeah, interacting in the space and sometimes if it's a 3-year-old, it's, he's had the toy all morning and I haven't had a turn yet. The other kid goes, oh, is that all you wanted? Here, here's the toy.
Use your words.
Yeah. And they go right back into relationship when there's that guidance. I think it's the sacred masculine and feminine principles.
Well, a friend of mine described it to me once, I think fairly accurately, that the sacred masculine is there to teach how to play well with others.
How to play ball?
How to play well with others.
Yeah, like a team type.
Not necessarily even team, but how to negotiate the space of playing with others in the doing in a way that helps them want to play more with you. You know?
To make it to make it safe and fair.
Yeah, and here's some basics of how to foster that relationship and some basics of what can cause that to go awry. In your experience, what are the most common elements that cause the creativity to leave those spaces? Like what curtails that creative relationship mostly in young ones?
When there's a judgment placed on the product, and instead of the qualities of being able to stick to the image and see what the image might have to say. And
Right.
it's not just what the person who did it says it is. It is that and more. If it's allowed to be discussed and valued for what's there. Because, green can be life-giving. That color, green, can be life-giving or deathing, molding,
Right.
So it's like, both are true, and all the shades of gray in between. So I think one of my teachers was Florence Kane, who wrote the book The Artist in Every Person.
I'm familiar with that book. I have not read it.
Well, I'll see if I still have it, and if you want to read it, you could. But she, as a teacher, would bring in kids that, she'd try to get them to use all the senses. Their bodies, so the easels were full length size.
Really get into it.
Yes, and just really move and just not be inhibited. That's I guess why people use drugs and alcohol to loosen the inhibitions,
Right.
so that what's unmasked can come forth.
Yeah. So masking. I mean, that's a whole other avenue.
I have a bunch of them in my art room.
All right. We'll take a walk
We'll
out
go
there in a
look.
minute.
Okay.
How did you get into? So I'm guessing to some degree. Did you get into teaching art with kids at some point?
I mostly did art therapy with them.
Okay. Describe what that means for you, art therapy.
Well, therapy, comes from the rapist is in the word, and it's also paying attention to whatever comes up. So to stimulate areas of the unconscious to come forth, to tell us its truth, in a sense, or whatever it wants to say, we would use in groups, we'd give permission for them to express anger versus what's the opposite of anger. So we go into the emotion, ex movere, to move it out. How can the paper or the clay or the wood contain what the creator wants to show?
Right, so a certain catharsis, an activation of a sympathy with that internal space.
Yeah, we would magnify versus Freud was more about shrinking the
Because he was a little
unconscious.
shriveled limp dick that had a few habits.
So in archetypal psychology, it's a magnification. If you only get a little piece of a dream at night and you remember it in the day, if you can somehow capture that little piece and amplify it, magnify it.
What are some techniques of amplifying and magnifying those little pieces of subconscious dream talking to you?
Well, just basically to see what the hand would want to show.
So,
How is the hand going to show that little piece of dream, which,
oh, right, kind of an invitation. Oh, are we not paying attention to you? I think that there's a sense of kind of like this puppy friend of ours over here, that dreams do kind of invite us to play with them a bit if we open up that space too. Is that kind of what you mean by what would the hand want us to see through that? Is like inviting yourself
just trusting. It's not in your head, in other words. It's more in the hand. And so if you kind of let go of preconceived image and let your hand guide you, see what comes up. Let's do some scribbling to get you going.
Yeah.
That's how she taught Florence King. She taught about how to loosen people up without drugs.
Without drugs? You can do that?
With art.
Yeah, which is a kind of drug in itself.
Right brain activation, those endorphins.
Well, I think there's
where's your ball? Oh, he put the dolly right at your foot.
He wants me to... There is a tendency, I think, especially in this modern culture, to step away from the body's intelligence and how it relates to the mind's intelligence and the heart's intelligence and the intelligence that all of those things are parts of. And so by accessing it from different inroads, in this sense, you're talking about what I see as kind of the body's intelligence is a more direct line to the subcurrents of our soul coming through.
Yeah, something other.
Yeah.
Something other than I-ness.
Yeah.
Which we're so used to the I taking charge of everything, even in the dream world. And yet, it is an opportunity to hear from the others, the other parts, whether they're the rapist or some of the dreams I had were so alchemical, meaning you actually are swimming in shit.
Yeah, I think we've all had those similar sensations.
And then, as I walked up and out of it, I entered a room full of gemstones and jewels. And then there was this need to try to steal those things by the eye and the dream.
Stealing the fruits of knowledge, in a sense.
And whoa, it bordered the Hermetic principles.
Which one in your mental frame, which Hermetic principle is that most?
As above, so below. In the shit lies the jewels, in the black coal under pressure becomes the diamond.
Yeah. So this transmutive quality, and you also like in your lead into that, we're talking about therapist, the rapist, and like how much do you incorporate that archetypal? Because that to me is like an archetype. It might be equated with like the prostitute, or one of those other overlays of that archetypal blueprint.
Sure.
How does that come into play in your process?
Well, know thyself. You have to know where you end and somebody else begins.
Right.
Otherwise, you're in trouble. But sometimes your patients do bring you the most important things, through whatever they're working on, and then you realize, oh my God, that lives in me too. Don't tell anybody.
Physician, heal thyself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in my experience, I've had a little bit of working with others in that space in the client's chair, and if they haven't done the work they're doing on themselves, I'm typically not interested.
Yeah, right. Well, I had a friend, Doug Belknap, in Santa Fe in Albuquerque, who he didn't want anybody on drugs. He wanted to deal with the people raw as they are, mentally ill with whatever. And so he advocated for that. And then the dreams, he would work with their dreams. So and he was pretty eccentric himself. But that's where we studied the Red Book. With those images of amazing how that all came up.
Tell me a little bit about the Red Book, what it is, and why it's a seminal part of Western psychological thought.
Yeah, well, is it?
I think it is.
Part of popular?
I wouldn't say popular, I said seminal.
Seminal,
As in of great importance to the way that the thought unfolded for the paradigm of what we call Western psychology in this instance, and on deeper levels anyway, what do you think?
What I can tell you is that Jung said that if you write down and draw things in a book every day, make it your practice, that it will become your church. And so it's a collection of these, I think, powers that be. The Egyptians called them the netters. From the one come the many, and Jung called them the archetypes. And so I think it helped him not to be possessed by, some of I know the Paradiso, Dante's work influenced Jung quite a bit, and, he had affairs with people, and so one thing he did that Freud kept bringing it back to reality, and Jung said, no, let's explore.
Let's go further.
Yeah.
In my reading of the Red Book, there was a number of things that struck me. One is that he was most obviously a student of alchemy, and the processes of alchemy and those aspects of alchemy that look within for let man be the measure of all things, in other words. And in the process and the technique of his exploration, there are some really interesting techniques that he applied. One of them was he came up with writing, maybe by accident, I'm not sure, came up with these writing devices where he wrote from different tenses, like literally different sentence structures for different aspects of his subconscious, the ego, the id, and he wrote from like first person on the one hand, the ego, second person, third person removed, future tense, past tense, present tense. He switched between these different methodologies of structuring his language to express the differentiation between different aspects of what he was discovering in himself through the lens of his dream work and
the metaphors.
And the metaphors that go with them, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And
very much so.
Really
wow.
found that super fascinating that
the wise old man who came up and the snake and there were some I used to be the president of New Mexico Art Therapy Association.
Oh wow.
So I did a workshop with other organizations called Mining the Unconscious. And I want to bring it here to
whatever we can do to make that happen.
So, in doing it, 25 people showed up, and we had some music and some words of inspiration about how to enter into using the materials and what to trust in this process. To relax people, to even do a meditation initially with the breath work and, getting you relaxed. And so that the inhibition part is really trusting this hand more than it is up here in your head. I've found for myself. And some of my best images came from a doodle.
Yeah. I have many of those.
Doodle. Who did that?
Right.
And the poets say that too. That I wake up from a slumber and I read what I wrote and I said, did I write that?
Yeah, there's stories of Edison having a practice, speaking of that kind of liminal space.
Oh yeah, betwixt and between.
Yeah, betwixt and between,
That's
where he would
right.
hold like a big ball bearing.
Oh.
And he would sit there in that state, and then when he'd drift off, he'd let that would drop. And when it hit the ground, he'd wake up, grab his notebook, and just start stream of consciousness writing. And according to the anecdote, that's where he derived a lot of his concepts. I mean, there's some other evidence that suggests he got a lot of his concepts by stealing them from others. And he was obviously intelligent and did have some novel concepts of his own. And interesting practice for sure.
It is, that would be interesting to try.
Some obviously, like we were talking about when we started this conversation, there are those who are more kinesthetic, there are those who are audio-visual, to put it in the modern, more common lexicon parlance.
Well, it's been removed for so many people.
Yeah, so I think the power in what you're talking about is the capacitance to come at this from whichever direction is most in line and natural for your way of being. And that we all have these different aptitudes and play to them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. And, whenever I sleep on anything, I have clarity in the morning about how to proceed,
Now, do you keep that clarity all through the day?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I try to create, every day. I try to create something, whether it's with paint or like I just did some stucco work on the back of the cafe. And, it's learning about how certain substances create hardness. Hardness and softness. We talk alchemy.
Yeah.
And the potter, wetness and dryness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's really, the archetypal focus is you can work with anybody on their psyche just by what they do. You know, if it's a mechanic, tell me about your engine.
The way I approach it typically, because it's my natural aptitude, is my inroad is often with people's words, the language they use about describing their relationship with what they experience, and that allows a playful space to go, hey, check out this word that you're using really often, and opening up that space for them to, if they want to step into it, cool. If they don't, cool.
Over her ass jokes.
Yeah,
I said, you better cut that out. You're calling it up.
There is that. So speaking of repeated things that I've heard a couple times, tell me about this cafe. What is it, and why are those types? First, what is the project, and why is it important for us to engage that kind of space with each other?
Well, I think it can.
Well, first, what is it?
It's an inspiration cafe.
Okay.
You know, where you fill in the blank. How would you, as an early childhood teacher, how would you let your inner child come forth and experience poetry night or science night or justice night where we look at laws, or you know, whatever it is, you know, somebody might want to do, it's not canning, but when you ferment food, that's probably the best food you could make and eat. So it's all about that too, reforming, because it's disease care. It's not really health care. I mean, they're great when you break a bone.
Yeah.
I mean, I love some of the nurses I've worked with, but it's not a place I want to go to.
Yeah. So this is creating a place people want to go to? So
this would be creating a space people want to go to work on their health, too. Whatever you can do.
Finally, he's giving me the time of day. He's giving me the time of day.
Good boy.
See, this is building relationships.
Boy. Yeah. That's a good doggy. Good doggy. Good boy.
Hello, new friend.
He hasn't been around a lot of people. Good boy.
We're helping him socialize.
You're so sweet. You're so sweet. Yes, you are.
He's way mellower than when I first met him.
He's so sweet. Yeah, he's growing up.
He's got a job to do. He's protecting
2 years old. He's protecting me. I have to be the pack leader.
Yeah. Lead by example. And so is the cafe part of that also, like leading by example by creating a space where there's an opportunity to observe ways of interacting that are more wholesome?
Yeah, I think if we can, help people realize the inner marriage within of the king and the queen, then we really realize that we don't need, if we rule our own behavior, we need rules, but not rulers.
Right.
And that's really what we have to get to in the new world.
Yeah, so there's a sense that rules come out of, these behaviors that we over time habituate as inaccurate ways of dealing with each other, and through habituating those, they become custom, and those customs then become
call
rules.
Police.
Well, we can.
Well, you can, but then you open up another can of worms.
Well, a question I often ask myself when I'm going into those situations where that might be an option.
Yeah.
Am I like this is a fundamental of law, is am I removing controversy or am I adding to the controversy by this action that I'm about to consider? And so that seems to me to be a great metric of finding what actually resolves the fundamental issues and allows me a space to step further into where did this controversy arise and why, and what is my part in it, so I can come to honor within myself to step into that, to really provide a space for forgiveness and reciprocity and clarity in removing controversy.
Right, like a dialectic, in that you have
Sure.
a dialogue with other people to clarify, was there harm done? What was the injury?
Yeah, I start with myself. Yeah.
Like, I was thinking about that deer, would I be causing harm to anyone
Uh-huh.
before saying, yeah, let's try it? I did say, let's go on YouTube and see what they say about roadkill.
Well, I have stuff to say, but I grew up eating, roadkill raccoons and deer and whatever, because we were literally dirt poor. And, there's some things to pay attention to, like how long's it been on the road?
Right.
How much blunt force trauma did it have, and did that rupture organs? These are because that can toxify the meat and won't be healthy to eat.
Yeah, it didn't have
sepsis and things like that.
Right.
So there's a certain amount of discernment that goes into the process, and I'm all for it personally. And here in Oregon,
I don't judge it.
Here in Oregon, on the legal side of it.
Yeah,
I know it's a little bit of digression, but no, it's actually legal.
Oh, is it
legalized about 5 years ago?
Oh, is it really?
5 or 6 years ago. If you hit it, you are allowed to collect that roadkill.
Oh, for goodness sakes!
Allowed. I never asked permission because why isn't any of their business if I? Yeah. We don't technically have the king's land here. It's all the king's land, and we're all kings. So,
are we? The state?
Yeah. Well, it's still voluntary. I know it's a sticky thing for people to get their heads around. Yeah. I know it is, because due diligence, discern for yourselves, and trust and verify. And it's complicated, and it comes with a lot of need to really dig into the relationships and the overlay of how we have been entrained to conceptualize authority and conceptualize permission and all of those things.
Have you seen that book?
I've seen that picture. Something is wrong when an American affidavit of probable cause. Right. So this makes, I hope, the distinction between wrong and incorrect. And this really is speaking, because it's right there. Well, wrong is something that is, on the verge of a trespass. It's something that is very severe. Incorrect means I misspoke and conflated two ideas or confused concepts or used an improper word. I'm not wrong. Yeah. I'm incorrect. And so,
and even if you are, you have a right to say it.
Yeah. So back to the thing about the contracts that we have been entered into.
And have we? How do we get out of them?
Well, that's what I mean is due diligence.
Yeah.
There are
due diligence.
There are absolutely verified. It's a verified fact that these are relationships that, while they don't technically meet the grounds of an actual contract, what they do meet, and often how it's the inroad is, and you all need to, don't take my word for it. In other words, but how they operate is essentially in a trust agreement And that trust agreement is that the government has generated a trust on your behalf. And since you are a trust...
Revocable living trust.
Yeah, so Susticate trust,
I've been looking
technically.
at that. Yeah.
But so the point being is that they have made this trust on your behalf as the grantor of that trust. And you are considered a ward of the state through a varying processes that we can get into on a different discussion. But as a ward of the state, in absentia, for being a beneficiary of that trust, you are taken to be, as in you're absent, because you haven't come forward to speak on your own behalf,
Right.
then you become de facto a trustee. Meaning you have all of the duties and obligations of upholding that trust without the benefits and privileges that come with it.
Oh,
And so by stepping forward to claim your rights, one can become recognized, become cognizant, and step into being the beneficiary of that trust. Now, that does not mean you own that instrument because you did not create it. Therefore, you can have the benefits and privileges in what's called a usufruct, meaning somebody else created it and gave you the right to act within that instrument. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people trying to track down these trusts and cash them out and all of that stuff, and you didn't create it. It's not technically yours.
Right.
Though you can make it so that contractually it cannot cause you harm. Because if it caused you harm, that would be a trespass.
Duress.
There's a bunch of ways of interacting with that, and that's what I mean about digging into yourself to find your own relationship with it, because the power of your own word is what creates law.
Yeah.
And law becomes our interactions between each other, which become, in the commons become custom, and those customs become common law, and that common law becomes blah, 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 all the way now to these massive infrastructures of administrative procedure that extract the power of our word. And money is, in essence, the fruits of human action created by the power of our word and its influence and impact in how we step into the world. So, we have the right, if we become cognizant of our word and action in right relationship with divine and with ourselves and with those around us, to claim that right. So, anyway, a little tangent aside, and very important because we're stepping into a time when that process is becoming more in line with what's happening in the trajectory of the energetics of this realm, and so the more we can become cognizant of that, the more we can step into it.
With things that are afoot and changing, we're going to need to know more about all of that.
Whether they're, broader trends of human interaction or the trajectory of the realm, as I call it, the world. Regardless of that, it's an opportunity and a great time for digging into our own relationship with it and really coming to clarity within ourselves. And the more clarity we have within ourselves, the more clarity we have in the interactions in our world. And how cool is that?
Exactly. And I think the more we take right action. So, when your thoughts are in alignment with your heart, your feelings, and then your action is in alignment with all of that.
And so
what's that called?
It's called putting together this. It's called putting together this cafe because that's an outward expression of the inner clarity you have. I really think it's a cool project. I do want you to tell me more about the nuts and bolts of what it is.
Yeah. Well, we're on a journey. It's, when we came to Cheshire, we had been talking about down the rabbit hole and how many different rabbit holes we went down living in St. Helens. And so we thought, if the shit hits the fan, can we trade some fish for an appointment, for whatever the need might be, or for some potatoes or whatever you want. And we thought, and my social worker friend said, yeah, Rose, I think a doctor would definitely take some fish for an exchange of treatment, Sure. So I came up here from New Mexico to try to do that with Aaron and Kate, my son and daughter-in-law. So here we are. We're creating a cafe, but also an open space, a blank space where whatever can unfold within each person who's around here, who wants to explore their inner self or what they're interested in. And
Access.
Jung did a thing called active imagination. Freud did free association.
Yeah.
Right? So he would give you a list of words and then you would respond. And Jung would take you more on an imaginative trip.
Right.
And set up a scene for you to take the stairs going down.
Yeah.
Down, down.
Reminds me of my love of Dungeons and Dragons. One of the things I love about that game.
That's a great game. That's a great game.
Would you like to play?
I don't know how to play, but the boys told me that Carl had a son who was into it, and he showed me all these figures. I said, this is like sand tray therapy.
Yeah, it actually, there's a lot of very, very similar aspects to it. And I use it in that way as a model of means of self-discovery. And what was missing from the game aspect of it, the tabletop role-playing games, is the integrative practicum. How do you take what the experience was and then bring it into the space of unpacking, your own relationship with the decision-making process, the symbols that are there, the interactions you had with the other players, and those aspects of it. And it's cool.
A lot of it's based on mythology.
Yes.
And so that's, the foundation of archetypal psychology is really found mythology. Hermes Trismegistus and, the metals of silver and gold, Apollo and the gold, and then going back to Egypt.
And before that on some level.
And before in the Sumerian realm now, I've been amazed at what I've been learning about the recent uncoverings in archaeology of some of these megalithic structures that
all over the place.
Blow my mind. Yeah. Russia, China.
Yeah.
Places I've never been.
I would point out and direct people, if they're interested in that kind of thing, to Michael Cramo's work, Forbidden Archaeology, and it is well documented, and use your own discernment. Looks pretty conclusive to me, based on his work and others' work, that these things have been being found and unearthed and covered back up for a very long time.
I think so. I mean, the most recent one I heard was in Montana.
Oh, right.
I think that they actually saw it from Google Earth,
Yeah, and then probably wiped it off of Google Earth so that you couldn't find it again. Because I've watched that happen in real time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're looking at something, and then all of a sudden it's like blurred out.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Fascinating.
So, even like having groups, I used to do these groups where people would come for an afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be drawing from the outside inside.
Mm-hmm.
So you would just simply go out and find a bush, a tree, a shrub, an item in nature that you study and you spend time with. You might jot down a few things about it, but the idea would be then to come back inside.
Mm-hmm.
And use paint and materials like that.
What strikes me about that process is that, so in the kind of spiritualist communities for quite some time, there's a lot of talk about awareness and the importance of awareness and being aware and all of that. And it has come to me to this knowledge for myself and in how I work with others, that awareness is a second order aspect of something more fundamental. And that fundamental aspect is what you're talking about, is honing one's attention to be able to focus well enough to be aware.
To be present.
Be present to focus your awareness. And so if you don't build the tools of aptitude and attention and focus, it's very difficult to hone that awareness to any real craft in the sense of the self-inner work, the alchemical transmutation of one's, the balancing of your polarities and the sacred marriage and all of those things. Does that sound accurate?
Yes, it's definitely, And I think to help people get there is to just help them realize that they don't have to know how to do it. It's all in the hand. Mm-hmm. It's the magical hand that really is connected to the imagination. I think I can say that. I think there's enough people that have said how. Plus, the other thing about the hand, even in a scribble or doodle, it activates the right brain, and that's what holds the endorphin. Mm-hmm. So you can actually soothe pain and suffering that way. And
also have a clearer inroad to where emotions are trapped in your body and start to build an awareness through your attention of how to release that and move through it.
See what's there. Is it psychological or is it nutritional? Because the nutrition side has been completely ignored in my lifetime. Thank God I still have some teeth left.
That's a whole thing.
But I'm not afraid to laugh. And I hope that it will, I think when you do imagination properly, maybe we need Imagination 101.
Right. Hey, you're doing imagination wrong.
Yeah, right.
Let me show you how.
Yeah, right. So it's allowing whatever medium to have a life of its own.
Mm-hmm. I love this word medium because it has this connotation, and we're talking about the spiritual aspect. In a sense, we are communing with the deeper spirit of our own knowing to bring it forward.
Right.
It's kind of a self-seance, this act of art.
Another idea I want to do is to have like a paint night but do it a little different. So each person has a small canvas, but then there's a central large canvas that everyone paints on, and see what we as a group.
Kind of like what was it, the Bauhaus. I might have that incorrect, but the Exquisite Corpse was a practice of passing a painting or a drawing or writing around, and each person adding to it and building off of it. My friend Jason Botkin, who I did my first Beauty Seed interview with, is a muralist, and he started with some friends this project called En Masse, where they started in like gallery spaces and empty rooms and walls and things that were donated, and they would go in, and the only rule was that it was in black and white.
Oh.
And they created that kind of space and dialogues around it.
Fun.
And
yeah. Black and white media?
Yeah, like mostly paint.
Mostly paint. Okay.
But no holds barred, really.
Yeah.
And that was the unifying element that allowed for a unified composition. And then they had some, people with a little bit more chops, technically, who would kind of tie in elements and come back in and bring it into a more cohesive whole. But the point being that with this, because color does, have a lot more harmonic interplay and can lead to these, what am I looking at here? And these things don't go together. And when you remove that element, this black and white allows you to move through the subject matter and overlay and imagine and build narrative and all of these other processes of this discovery that are really, I find it really cool. And Jason's amazing. You'll get a chance to meet him. He's going to come through sometime soon.
Oh, good.
Jason, you're coming through sometime soon, aren't you?
We hope so.
Yeah. And so to tie a couple different concepts we've been talking about, you have this space that is in the front of your property that you've made into this cafe, meeting space, kind of a salon of sorts.
Yes.
This imagination space. And you also have structured it in the dynamic of how it's seen from the exterior world in this private agreement, where it's a members agreement where people who come into the space are part of a membership.
That's private.
That's private, and aside from the legal overlay of interacting or not interacting with the public-private, there's another aspect of that I find almost more fascinating, and that is the relationship with those around you, where you have this encapsulated idea that we call the rules of the club or the laws of the trust. These things that give us a framework of the framework of how we interact, and the people stepping into that gives them a lens through which to discover what it means to be in the private.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people have no relationship with that. They don't know what that concept even means.
Yeah.
And so it's an opportunity to kind of discover the terms even to begin the conversation. And that's pretty cool.
In thinking about this semi-truck, the 44-footer, turning that to a tiny home, do I want it to be public and have Airbnb capabilities, or there's something in me that says no, I want to keep it private.
Well,
and keep it within word of mouth and through people that know people.
Yeah.
And that we all know each other for the sake of safety and also fairness.
Yeah, in that space, what strikes me is that in the space of the private, reputation matters.
Yes.
And in the space of the public, the whole point of it on some fundamental level is to do away with the need for reputation and have that institution verify the trust. Right? Mm-hmm. And so I suppose on a fundamental level, it's like the question becomes in negotiating whether to do it, Airbnb or
What do you mean by institution?
the institution verifies the trust. Like we've allowed institutions of governance, like the state, to give license to these actors to verify for us, so we don't have to negotiate for ourselves the verity of reputation. Because verity of reputation in a broad community becomes a little bit more difficult. And it's not good or bad. It's something that came out of an increasing complexity of the commons.
Well, and too, with the COVID episode, which I won't go into, but there are people in Albany from Hungary, and they could not keep their business open. And so what they ended up doing is more of a private venue of a smorgasbord, on 2 nights a week. And it's through the word of mouth, the people that love their food, and so they're keeping it alive, but they can't have it be public because they're a small restaurant,
If you're a restaurant, you probably have an EIN number, and EIN stands for Employee Identification Number, and mandates are only technically valid for employees of the institution that issued them. And so if you're acting as an employee of the state, you're bound by the duties and obligations that come with the benefits and privileges of that. Bam. And so actually a friend of ours has a bookstore in Eugene locally, like a metaphysical bookstore, rock shop, and he was trying to negotiate staying open, and and people were complaining, and he's got letters, and he called them and said, okay, let's figure this out, lovingly said, let's figure this out. And it came to light that he's a sole proprietor. And they said, well, actually, we have zero jurisdiction over you as a sole proprietor.
Yes.
You can choose to, or you can choose not to. We have no skin in the game on that. So have a great day. Enjoy whatever you end up deciding. And so he stayed up open the entire time, and he had people who were all in for it and people who were all against it, and everyone in between coming in because they had questions that were coming up in themselves. And it was one of the very few stores that remained open that had access to different ways of exchanging and interacting with the space of self-discovery, which seemed to be the antidote to that whole situation.
Oh, interesting.
Pharmaceuticals weren't the antidote, and I would say even diet isn't the antidote unless you talk about what you take in informationally. The antidote was self-discovery and digging into knowing yourself well enough to discern your relationship with the external world, with the overlays of public and private agreement, and your place in it.
Yes,
right?
Exactly
so,
right. Yeah, that's
it was
very
a
good point.
Fascinating time, wasn't it?
Yes, So, going back to that, it put a lot of people out of business, sad to say, because it hurt a lot of people, and so is United States Inc. something that I want to support? No.
United States of America is something I want to support?
I want the Constitution. I'm a constitutional kind of a female. And, so...
Well, fundamentally, I think one of the great benefits of that whole experience that we all move through collectively is that it brought to light and brought into our awareness, into our attention, this desire to look at how can we do this better so that we don't have to do that again. And that is the benefit of historicity and of having moved through these experiences. And there is a process right now of integrating that experience that has had some really positive outcomes. And I see it in action in my life and in the people around me and in the broader projects that I've been engaged in the law space, in festival space, in private trust and equity, and people's knowledge of those, and stepping into really educating themselves on those relationships. There's been a lot of benefit to it, and real coming together of community through that, and people seeing a value in those community relationships that I think had kind of been less fostered and less well taken care of because of the complacency that comes along with convenience. You know, the convenience of and the momentum of
I get
how it's always been.
lazy with, convenience, but yeah.
Well, you placed yourself optimally to not have as much convenience, being far out from town and in a smaller community, and Now you do have the convenience of a very capable son.
I do.
Guy's a badass.
He is a
Speaking of
badass.
engaging in all of those things we've been rambling about.
Yeah. He turned people on that were here in the family to learn about, who we are as sovereign beings, so that's good.
It's excellent.
And Marshall, I don't know.
Thanks for him.
Yeah, I don't know if you've heard of Marshall Rosenberg.
Yes, I have.
Have you?
Yeah.
Well, he did. So I spent time with him. I was so lucky. For
those who aren't familiar with him, tell us who he is.
He wrote Nonviolent Communications, How to Cultivate a Compassionate Heart. And so he talked about feelings, needs, and how to express your feelings and connect them to a need not being met or being met in a form of communication. Because if you ramble on, you lose people.
Yeah.
You
think?
So he was the product of a wonderful mother who fed people in Detroit. They lived in Detroit, and he had to navigate the public schools back there. And he asked the vital question, what is it that keeps us connected to our compassionate nature?
Right.
And what is it that disconnects us from it?
Yeah.
And so looking at the Nazi Holocaust and some of the real sad things that have happened in our history, he explored that and actually went to Palestine and hooked up with some Israeli people who also went. They met each other, these 10 Palestinians and 10 Israeli people, and he took them off to Switzerland, where he paired them up, and he said, "No, take a hike in the forest, and don't come back until you can introduce each other to the group." So it had to force them to get to know each other.
Setting and circumstance.
Yes.
Hi.
And so as a result of that, they became very close and are friends. So we know it can be done. We know we can do life better. And so, that's what we're after. How can I affect change and leave the space a little bit better than I found it? Or help me to be better than I started out maybe being, because it all can change. Just
instantaneously, even.
What you think.
Yeah.
Expands. Okay. Do you like Abe? He's a nice man.
Yeah.
He's a nice man. Yes.
We've become friends.
Yes. I'm so glad.
Let's go take a look at some art.
Okay. That or science in residence. Or
Well, I consider it all art if your attention is in that space of generative creativity. And
yeah.
science can be that. Accounting can be that, for fuck's sake. I mean, you know.
So, this is a conglomeration of work I've done. Maybe I should let you smoke a little bit and I'll be right back. This is somebody else's work who lived in the 40s.
Like if you hold the door open, hold the door open. There we go.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll zoom in on it.
Okay. Okay. So, where do we go from here?
That's a great question. Where do we go from here?
I know, right? Some of these things I did when I was younger, like this was when I was studying the soul of beauty with Ron Schenk down in Houston. I was living Jung Center there in town. So we studied T.S. Eliot and the wasteland and how people at that time, wartime, the Depression, they suffered. And so I ended up getting the spirit Mercurius. So Mercury is the Greek god, or Mercury is Roman, Hermes is Greek.
Right.
And basically, he is the caduceus, which is the snake that wraps around the pole for the doctor's symbol of health. So, and he's a god of polarity, so opposites, male, female. One of the 7 Hermetic principles is the law of polarity. And so this for me was a polarity image based on the alchemical dream work that I was involved with back then. We really looked at our dreams to see who we are and all the parts that exist deep in us that we don't even know, till we have a dream and then we go, oh, who was that?
Let's look deeper at this.
Yeah. So, and then just scribbles. This one was like there's a naked woman there and she's regurgitating this fantasy about a frog and holding in its mouth a lion heart. And one of the things my teacher, James Hillman, wrote was The Thought of the Heart. It's one of his seminal books that I would love to revisit with people, along with the myth of Amor and Psyche, which is a myth not too many of us know, but a lot of the fairy tales really come from the story of Psyche and Eros. Eros was the god of erotic love, and Psyche was a mortal human that meant butterfly. Psyche means
Oh, I didn't know that.
butterfly, so change. You know, it's always about change and giving up, and how she navigates her life without her love, because she fell in love with Eros.
There's an interesting correlation or correspondence, even to put it in alchemy terms, between the psyche being the butterfly and the image of the brain, and the two hemispheres of the brain being the wings of a butterfly, with the corpus callosum being the in between the body.
Yeah. And the chrism.
It popped in my head, so I figured I'd bring it up.
That's we're going into the Christ energy now,
Yeah, right.
Wow.
And so there is a sense in like bringing together polarities and within ourselves, in the masculine and feminine, where Psyche and Eros coming together is the emotional body meeting up with the mental body.
It's the heart.
Yeah.
And then the spirit that is the empty space between them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool.
So, you know, this is just a conglomeration of my work, and I wouldn't, you know, I'm not a fine artist for sure, but I know that it has worked for me in terms of just...
Well, isn't that part of your point earlier, was that we are there for a process, not a product?
Yes, exactly, right. Correct.
And so the process and the imagery and symbology that comes up out of our inner work in our comprehension and understanding of ourselves is the thing that is the journey of that process. Yes. And the product is
not. That's right. That's right. It is the experience, the phenomenological, existential experience. So, yep.
So
and
how important is play in that space of that?
Extremely important.
What's play to you?
Play for me is with the paint. You know, and just letting go and letting God, in a sense. They say in the 12 steps, you know, let go and let God. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely an otherness, and it can be playful. It can also be sorrowful too. Mm-hmm. You know, so this one is more sorrowful and somber.
Which I find to be a very strong composition, technically, and very playful in a sense. And the tone is a kind of these tonalities of conflict, in a sense.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
Interesting. That so much can be told with, what I find to be the more inviting aspects of that form of abstraction is the word I was looking for.
Yeah, allowing a little chaos in.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, that was Psyche's first labor, was she had to sort seeds.
Okay.
And so one of her labors, Hercules had labors.
Yeah.
Well, so did the soul, Psyche.
Yeah.
And she had to sort a room like this full of seeds in 2 hours' time. And she gave up and said, I can't do it, I can't do it. And all of a sudden, these little ants come out from the walls and say, don't give up, Psyche. We'll help you. And they sorted it all out for her.
So what are the ants in this
So
story,
she
you
gets
think?
grace from that,
Yeah.
That's what we're after, grace. So yeah, the ants are the helpers.
Yeah.
The little helpers.
There's Aaron.
That come when you're ready to give up. So, especially to our youth, don't give up. But let's look at the giving up.
Right. There's a sense of, in that space of being on the precipice of giving up is also a letting go that allows for faith to enter, I guess.
Something other than you.
Yeah.
Or I, the I-ness that's always controlling everything in the day world. And these are the terms that we use to differentiate the night world from the day world. So, can a painting contain an emotion, a darkness, a shadow? And sometimes you need to do 2 or 3 of them
Yeah.
before you start to get some color. So it's all black initially.
Yeah.
For some.
Yeah.
For others, it might be red because of the pain and the suffering that might be there. That we're not really taught how to deal with it.
Right.
And the body is a darn good option, but it can only hold so much stress.
Yeah, and suppressed anger is a big one for a lot of ailment for people.
Yes. And I've found that unless you're really easy to anger, you wouldn't want to do, these target exercises. Because you want to be able to manage the anger and get underneath it. It's secondary, right, to pain, fear, heartbreak.
Well, there's
the wound.
Yeah.
The wound. So the wound, is a very important topic to allow a space for. Because why? What does the wound hold for us? It holds our genius. Just behind it is the genius.
Yeah, there's an aspect of that. Yeah, it gives me the chills a bit too. There's an aspect of that we come into relationship with these wounds and with these trials and hardships, so that we, in this realm of opposition, have a framework to view our genius within.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I totally think that makes sense. Yeah. So, in what lens are we viewing it through? And are we open to hearing maybe how somebody else might dance to it?
Yeah.
Or move to it, or speak to it? Can we allow that? And those were the most powerful sessions where, a painting was done within an hour to an hour and a half. And somebody in the group pointed to a part of the painting and then said, I'm going to move to that.
Yeah.
And wow, we saw a real Aphrodite moment with, Venus and her copper energy. It gives you, you look again at that kind of beauty.
Yeah.
When you
beauty
see
and
it.
connectivity.
Yes.
Yeah. A real energy
Who's she
pass
married
through.
to? Hermes.
Yeah.
who was the god of communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
yeah. See, so she's
Yeah.
in this story of Amor and Psyche.
yeah,
This could be a wonderful thing to do that I taught in Houston
uh-huh.
to mostly engineers. They came to do art making because they wanted to be able to teach their people under them to be fresh in their ideas, to be
Mhm.
more imaginative.
Add novelty.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So it was good. It was, that myth is. Hercules had what? 12 labors? Psyche had only 4. So,
Yeah,
but it takes
they
you
were
into
they were
your-
tough labors.
They
Whoop.
were tough labors.
Oops. So, this has been an easy labor, and I want to thank you for joining me in this little
Sure.
exploration,
This
Looking-
little
looking through
exploration,
the-
I know it.
the lens
See the
of.
shield
I do.
of protection?
I feel it.
Can you feel it in here?
And
Oh,
I
good.
look forward to more of these exchanges, and
Good. All right. I like
I
it
look
too.
forward to offering everybody some. Let me reframe my camera because
I don't
I
get
hit
to
it.
talk like
I
this
hit
very
it dropping
much.
my coffee.
Don't worry
um,
about it. You're okay.
But I really enjoyed the space with you,
yeah.
and now we're going to a party because our
Sure.
community around here is rocking, and it's all the things that we were talking about in action, and how
Yeah.
fun is that to go have
Let's go
conversations
deeper.
with new people and
Yeah.
people we already know, and to dance and listen to music and
Yeah.
feel it, live
Yep.
it, be it. And I invite you all to do that in your own lives, because each beauty seed you plant grows into the flower for furthering all of this great work that we're here to do. And
That's right.
Yeah.
All right.
A
We'll
real
see
pleasure,
you again.
Rose.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Bye.
I thought you would start